It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. I've known Chuck for a very long time. He and Gib Henschke were doing things and working together and talking to me and engaging with me when I started here at USC 25 years ago. So I actually have known him for a long time. I know he looks young and you can't believe he's been doing this for that long, but I have, and so he must have been too. Chuck is a research professor in the School of Educational Studies at Claremont Graduate University, and if I understood him correctly, he's been there at least 35 years. He's a specialist in educational organizations, educational policy, and teacher unions, and currently studies schools where students learn differently. And the unconventional settings he hopes or he thinks will find keys to organizing emerging institution of public education. And he's done a number of reports and work on that. He also has spent many years studying the Los Angeles Unified School District, which is at least part of the topic for today's session. And he has two books, one called The Transformation of Great American School Districts, and the other called Learning from LA, Institutional Change in American Public Education. I've actually read the second of those all the way through. I'm a graduate of LA Unified, and it was of great interest to me. And I think you'll find what he has to say to be a really interesting and worthwhile thing. So without that further ado, I will turn it over to Chuck to make his presentation. And thank you very much for being here today.
Thanks a lot. Well, this is grand. I want to thank USC for the invitation, and particularly Rossier for getting all the details right. It's really nice people get the details right. My plan is that we've got about an hour and 15 minutes. My plan is that I want to try to shut up about 30 minutes into this, and so we can have the bulk of the time for your questions, because I'd actually planned this visit with the idea I was going to interrogate some people about their research, and I didn't know I was going to have to sing for myself. But anyway, I'm happy to be here. I came out with this sort of provocative title, it's sort of a straw man kind of title, but it really has three sort of raising three questions and then a declaration at the end. Will LAUSD continue to exist in something that looks like its current form 20 years from now? And I don't think there's any question that will, barring an earthquake. Now, by earthquake, I don't necessarily mean an earthquake, although that's the folks at Caltech tell us is likely. But I do mean an unforeseen event of large magnitude that breaks apart all the existing political structures and gives you a Katrina-like playing field in which new things are going to come about. My guess about the chances of legal breakup of the district into 20 pieces or 7 pieces or 5 or whatever the number is coming about is relatively small, simply because as I read the politics, I don't think that the politics are going to amass in ways that make that likely. At the same time, I think the idea of having a statewide voucher system is probably politically unlikely. So the answer to the first question is yes. Now the second question, which we're going to spend some time on, is will the district incrementally change into something that is radically different from its past? And I think that question is very interesting because in many ways it already has, and that's part of what I want to talk about this afternoon is this thing has changed slowly, but it has changed in ways that would make the district of 1960 or 1958 simply unrecognizable on the inside. On the outside, it still looks the same. You fly over the district from 30,000 feet, and you see buildings, and you see football fields, and you see oval tracks going around. It's one of the ways you know you're in America when you're flying over it, is you can see high schools. Third question is, can we get beyond permanent crisis? Learning from LA ends with the notion of we are in a permanent crisis. And as we have auditioned idea after idea after idea, and indeed we've auditioned the same 4 ideas about 16 times, and none of them seems to take place. There's just a tremendous amount of political wheel spinning. And so that's the third of the questions. Now, the declaration, and it really goes to what I've been working on for the last couple of years, and there's a little paste piece on the table right there, hold up paste piece. That I've been working on trying to look at education technology. Now, I am not a technologist, and I'm not a technological evangelist, but I do believe that we have the possibility within our grasp of fundamentally changing the nature of the teaching and learning system in our schools, and we have the capacity to do that. And that alone may be politically destabilizing. And so taking a page from Clayton Christensen's work, I want to talk a little bit about that at the end. But the first thing I need to do is, why am I doing that? The machine's over there. There. We need to go back, and this little book starts in about 1903. And it starts with some really radical ideas about how to put a school district together. The first thing it did was it got the mayor out of the school business. In 1903, the mayor of Los Angeles and the city council determined how the school ran. And so we in Los Angeles became the pointy edge of what was in that era called progressive politics. And it had 5 pieces. And I'm going to take a minute and talk about these 5 pieces because I think it's important that we realize what we have departed from and what we still carry with us sort of in our professional and academic DNA. But one thing that is still very, very much part of us is this notion about the acquisition and storage idea about what knowledge is. Knowledge is about opening your brain, pouring some stuff in it, and at the end of a period of time, a semester or 6 weeks or however long it is, you go, and the quality of your determines your grade. And it's perfectly all right to forget the stuff after that. I don't know how many of you have heard of Father Garducci, who has this wonderful stand-up comedy. Al Shanker used to bring him to meetings about all the stuff about you could repeat like 5 minutes all the stuff you ever learned in high school. It was really funny. Anyway, this is very much part and parcel of what we're trying to debate as we go into this notion about what the Common Core ought to be. How much of it is going to be acquisition and storage of knowledge, and how much of it is going to be actually the making and creating of stuff. The second piece was get the schools out of politics. Let's get the school board elected in ways that are different from the city council and all of that, and make it as apolitical as possible. The third thing was let professionals run things. The notion in 1903 was that a well-ordered professional bureaucracy was about as good as you could get in terms of being able to run an efficient and effective organization. And this institution in particular became the place at which people learned how to be school administrators, and that badge was carried with enormous honor and to an extent still is. Now, we also believed in this thing called aptitude. We created a bell curve learning system that said certain people ought to get a lot of learning and certain people ought to get a little, and they will sort one another out, and if they don't sort it out, we will help them. And finally, all of this was built on a notion of local control. Your local school district loosely bridled by the state, would raise the money, would decide the policies, and then these folks in the middle would run the stuff. Now, let me just ask you, does this look like the school district that you've got now? Yes or no? Some sort of visual sign here. No. Because by and large, we have ceased to believe that this is the kind of school district that we either have or that we want. But folks who do education reform still think they're reforming this. That is, they still think they're working within this model. Two things took place. One was the process of delegitimation. And the second was the process of hollowing out. And things that we have been a part of, those of us who are a bit aged, for most of our professional lives, were part of essentially taking down these 5 pillars. Desegregation and resistance. I marched through the South, as did a lot of people in the 1960s, with the firm belief that trying to break down the walls of racial segregation were an important thing. And there's a whole story that I'm not going to go into about the fight over the Alameda Wall, where white children were on one side and black children on the other side, and the school board stood in the middle, for 25 years, not allowing that change to take place. The blowouts and grassroots organizing. There are whole bunches of folks in LA who cut their teeth on the 1968 blowouts and the beginnings of the Chicano movement in Los Angeles. Collective bargaining, which I've spent a long time studying, gave agency to teachers, but the process of gaining agency for teachers was in part to create a dialogue that said the school district's no good. And then the direct election of school board members in districts. More representational democracy, less worldview of the city as a whole. And now I've done something. It's saying red instead of green. Did I turn it off?
No, it's working.
No, oh, love it. Okay. It's happy again. Local control, local control went away. Local control went away with Proposition 13. The school district can't raise a dime. Well, it can raise a little bond money. Actually, raise a lot of bond money. Actually, it's billions in bond money. But in terms of operating money, it has some problems. And this business with the iPads is a very topical example of that. It had to steal bond money in order to buy things with a 3-year half-life because it can't raise it. Proposition 13, an act of a state superintendent. The first real one of these was Bill Honig. Categorical programs, so all the money got sluiced into little silos. Testing targets. And so all of this had the effect of hollowing out the district and its ability to manage its own affairs. Did you know they used to have 450 people in LAUSD who wrote curriculum? There was a whole wing of a building, and there were where people occupied themselves creating their own curriculum. They've now outsourced their intellectual core. Where does the curriculum come from? It comes from Pearson. So this profound hollowing out of the district was part and parcel of what's going on. So now I want to come down to the part about warfare and the part about how do we get beyond the professional, the permanent crisis. So if we created this new political system in which we've got a more responsive democracy, in which we've got more agency for parents and more agency for parents and teachers, it's more racially diverse, it's more gender inclusive than it was before. How come we're not happy? Why don't we like this? Because we have in fact created a new version of what public school governance and democracy is supposed to be like. Why don't we like it? The answer is pretty clear. There aren't any winners. You'd think that if you had a powerful union, that it would be celebrating its power and the fact that it had supposedly won stuff. But teachers don't seem to be very happy about this. And certainly the union leadership doesn't seem to be very happy about it. And you would think that parents would be celebrating the fact that they had large amounts of agency. They don't seem to be happy. No one seems to be happy because there haven't been any definitive victories. Pluralism has descended into relatively narrow, short-term self-interest, and the movement from a hierarchy to a network has been hobbled by serious lack of capacity as a function of the hollowing out. So if we've got that kind of a situation, what happens next? And my headline here and in the stuff that I have been doing recently is not to quit fighting. That the instinct that you can get all the interest groups to sort of go away, or that you can find a political mechanism that can make them dampen down, is politically fallacious. It is, in a way, what we're seeing in the sort of red state politics, where, the way to run the school district is to take sufficient amounts of power and influence away from the existing system. Take it away from the superintendent, take it away from the school board, and for sure take it away from the union. I suspect in 3 or 4 years we can ask Scott Walker how that's working for him. Or we can ask the governor of Indiana how that's working for them. But at least in this venue, I think is profoundly the wrong fight. To me, this came to sort of a pointy head in the last round of school board elections. I mean, when you can spend $64 a vote in a school board election and not win, but just the gross amount of money ought to be a political upset. The Obama campaign spent $16 a vote in 2012. The Romney campaign a little bit more than that, about 20. $64 a vote suggests that we have a very serious problem with trying to think about moving the school district forward by changing the composition of the school board through the normal electoral process. I would much rather fight about another set of issues. And it's still a fight. I would much rather fight about another set of issues that has to do with how we build capacity in this system, how we add to its capability, how we backfill the questions of hollowing out, and how you begin to raise the questions about does anybody believe in this system anymore? I mean, there's a very telling line in Sandy Banks' column, the first one she wrote about the iPads, about the superintendent needs to understand that we don't really believe in the district anymore, and that anything you tell us will be taken with a certain degree of moderation. We need to fight over capacity building rather than fighting about governance. And then this comes to the end of what I wanted to say in terms of talking about a declaration. As I've been out, Larry said I've been out to a bunch of places that were sort of squirrely schools where people learn differently. I went to schools that were teacher run. I've been to schools that used a lot of technology. I've been to home schools. I've been to, and what I was looking for was to see if there was an outline in these places of a new learning system. And if so, could we build around it? And I think there is, and I think we can. This goes back, this is like Ted Sizer 20 years ago. But at some point we have to take seriously this notion that students are actually the workers in this system. And I don't mean that in a trivial way. I mean, by saying students need a lot of agency about how they use the tools of learning, how they access the tools of learning, and what they are told they are responsible for. When I went around to schools where students had been given a lot of agency, I was just dumbfounded with the sense to which students rise to the occasion. They come to understand that they are, in fact, the people who will determine whether or not they get through high school. But it takes a very different learning system than the one we've got now. Well, my semi-favorite here is the passage of the regurgitation system. We're in the midst of rethinking how we assess students, what those assessments look like. Will this idea about deeper learning that's sort of part and parcel of the Common Core, will that be sublimated by this notion of creating a new set of tests with the idea that what's likely to happen with a new set of tests is that school districts will reverse engineer this process. They'll build, instead of building on the ideas that are sort of glorious and part and parcel of the Common Core, they will build on the smallest possible unit, which is what kind of questions are you going to ask these kids in April, and how can I get these kids so they can answer these questions. So you're going to take a big and glorious idea and trivialize it as it goes through the instruction process. It is possible that we can come out of this process taking the great ideas in the Common Core and trivializing it. That's a fight that's worth having. Unbundling and rebundling of teaching, testing, and nurturing. When I was in high school, it was a long, long time ago. Your future really wasn't much determined by what you did on a test that somebody gave you outside the classroom. Your future was determined largely by what it was that that your teacher said to you and about you, and so teaching, testing, and nurture were bundled up into one bundle. Some teacher would come to you and say, "I think you ought to go to college." And when you go and you interview people who've had some success in life, most of them will tell you a story about a teacher who personally said to them, "You could do something with your life." None of the assessment systems that we have talked about lay a glove on that aspect of teaching, but it may be the most important thing that teachers do. And and teachers scream at us all the time, please help me pay attention to this. There's a wonderful story that was told about one of the this is actually one of the teachers who was named in this LA Times series on bad teachers, whose test scores were, or value-added test scores were, or the lower at the low end of the spectrum. That this teacher was the teacher that all the parents and all the kids went to help solve their problems. And that the teacher who was ranked at the highest of the test score gauge was the screamer in the school, the one who yelled at kids all the time, and it was pretty clear, because all the other kids ran away from her, and therefore she had relatively high test scores. Because only the really resilient ones would stay. But this unbundling and rebundling of this teaching function is going to be very interesting, because once you start to introduce notions of blended learning, as you're starting to do in your USC hybrid high school, once you start to allow kids access to learning tools, the idea that the primary job of the teacher is to engage in direct instruction, to do what I'm doing now, kind of goes away a little bit. Individualization is individualization. We actually have the capacity to break down the batch process system now. The question is, will we do it? And then finally add the notion of problem solving and collaboration to our list of basic skills. If we want these things, we probably need to think about how we assess them and how we make this part and parcel of what we think we value in education. So I could go on. I have about 47 more slides that I could talk about. I could talk about iPads for a long time. I could ask you questions about iPads, but I don't think I will. I think I will stop now. I think I will thank you, and I think I will take your questions. I'm going to turn this off. And so now, what are you curious about? Or what do you want to tell me?
So I'm intrigued by the notion of this fight over capacity instead of governance. And
Yeah.
I guess I'd like some practical ideas on how we get the focus on capacity building. Because I think if you talk to any educator, that's what they would tell you.
Right. Yeah, I'd like to fight on that, but I have to kill this dragon first.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, because there is the question is, how do you set up? This is a sort of a political science or political strategy question, isn't it? That's actually the question I came to ask all of you, and because I'm not sure I actually know, but let me play it out a little bit. You have to make some issues. You have to make the right issues bubble to the top, and that means you have to sublimate some of the other issues. One of the things that I think we need to start to think about, and it may be that this iPad issue in LAUSD actually has the kernel of being able to talk about this if you tweak the issue from, oh my God, some kids hacked this, like what were you expecting? You thought these kids were dumb. They're not dumb. They hacked your system. If you started to raise that issue in terms of what does the learning infrastructure we are building look like? And who has access to it, and who can build in this space. So then that raises a very interesting question about, are we just buying this stuff from Pearson, or are we constructing a commons? Are we constructing a space in which lots of people have the ability to work, and what levels of agency do we have for teachers and kids and schools
and different instructional notions, all within this space. And what kind of access do we give people? I mean, that to me is would be a very interesting policy fight to have, and it would be a fight because you get all the vendors arrayed on one side, and you could get everybody else arrayed on the other side. That would be kind of fun. There are probably others.
Let me ride that out for a second, because in a system as antagonistic as LA Unified,
Mm-hmm.
the way that it is politically right now, I don't know that you would get everyone else on the other side of that issue. I think you would have a union that says, our teachers aren't allowed to work outside of these hours of the day, and so they can't be part of this commons if they're, and so you'd have all these different groups that would then say this isn't feasible, or the charters don't want to join, or whatever it is, and that kind of deflates the capacity piece that we're hoping to build there.
There's another sort of interesting fight. Tom and I were talking about this a little bit earlier this morning. It's one of the questions I want to try to raise over the next year or so is there really what I would call a blue state labor policy? We know what red state labor policy looks like. What does blue state labor policy look like? We have taken our current set of labor practices and labor laws as if they're given precisely because the only alternative that's been raised to them is to hammer down the scope of bargaining so you don't get to bargain about very much, and to take away step and column and take away tenure, and so you get this massive resistance. You may get massive resistance anyway, but why not sort of put on the table, as it were, the kinds of things that you really want teachers to do, and see where that goes. It at least starts to raise the issue about how this works. I think the third thing that I'd think about is at some point you've got to follow the money. And if we're in a situation, and we've got a very interesting rolling experiment now, as who would have thought that Mike Kirst could actually get, local control, or what in the old days was called weighted student formula, but that didn't fly politically. On the governor's desk, much less past the legislature, and so. In terms of being a political home run, that's about as close as you're ever going to get. Now, the interesting thing will be to see what happens. How does that politics get played out in LAUSD and in other school districts? That's going to be a very, very interesting notion, because for the first time we've got a certain amount of running room, and Larry knows this much better than I, and I'd appreciate it if he'd talk about it a little bit, would be these district finance officers must be having some very interesting conversations about what they're going to do with the flexibility that's being dribbled out over several years, but it nonetheless is much more flexibility than these school districts have had about how they align their fiscal lives. I don't know.
Okay.
So over to you.
Well, I actually have a set of slides and I'm ready to go.
I got them here in the deck.
Yeah, thank you. If I find something you've got to check. The local control funding formula, I mean, Chuck's right. It's sort of an amazing thing. For any of you who ever took my school finance class, the first thing I'd say is, the system needs to be blown up and start over, and I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime, and it just did. And I told Mike Kirst a couple weeks ago, we were on a panel together, I said, you're my hero for being able to do that. I don't know how else to say it. It's really a pretty amazing thing. How it plays out is really going to take some time to understand, because the thing to remember is the first year only 5% of the money is distributed under the new formula. So it's sort of like, let's get used to this, let's learn how it is, let's learn how to count the children, let's do other things that we need to do. And it takes 5 years to roll it out. In parallel to that, there's more money in the system because of the Proposition 30 that passed. It has about $6 billion more for schools each year. The economy, we hope, is going to be getting better. We'll know at 12:01 tomorrow morning whether we're going to have a little delay in that or not, depending on what happens in Washington. But that change has some effect. So what are school business officers going to do? These are people who, for all their lives, have A, never had any authority to raise any money, and B, use as an excuse, I can't do anything but what I'm doing. You know, we'd like to spend money this way or that way, and if they don't want to do it, they just say, well, the rules preclude it. And if they want to do it, then they say, well, let me show you how to break the rules. And it's not quite as black and white as that, but to some extent it's close to that. So suddenly there's this freedom, and one of the back currents in Sacramento right now is, how do we require, or do we require schools and school districts to spend the money that children generate on those children and at those schools, because you actually count the children at the schools, not at the districts. And that's a hard call, because so much of the money we spend is spent to buy people whose price has relatively little to do with a variety of things that we think are important. It's based on a matrix on education and training, and so often the children who don't generate those extra dollars are in schools with the teachers who cost the most. And so if you start changing those things around, you have a problem. And I'll stop here because this is your talk, but the way I resolve that problem in my mind is I start by just saying, we're counting people. And we're not talking about the dollars we spend in a school, we're talking about the people. And so in a school full of children who generate these extra resources, we should see more teachers, we should see either smaller classes, more pupil support, more tutors, more time so that specialists, so there's collaboration, something, and just not worry about the dollars, because we'll get all our time spent about dollars and not thinking about student outcomes. So that's where I would resolve it if a finance officer asked me that question. They're not the group who's going to ask that question. That's not what finance officers think about. They think about dollars and cents. But that's really the next step in how you think about it. But that's just my thinking, and we would probably talk about that some more someday. It'd be kind of fun. Thank you.
Thanks.
So going off like the capacity building piece, and even using LCFF as an example of how capacity building really is for the purpose of sustainability, you know, for the sustainability of LCFF or sustainability of technology in the classroom. And I think in your presentation you focus a lot around capacity building on teaching and learning for students. And we all understand that the role of the district then is capacity building for its talent management, for its employees. But I think often what is lost in these conversations of reform or capacity building is the role of these external stakeholders, such as like parents and families in the community. And I think I always struggle with this thought of whose role is it to build the capacity of these, using the example of parents, whose role is it to build their capacity to be able to understand how they can support the implementation, the development, implementation, and sustainability of things like LCFF. So any thoughts around that?
Well, I'm tempted to kick this ball to Oscar Cruz, who's in the back. It's an organization called Families in Schools. The notion, I mean, one of the unfreezing parts of this old model of schooling was the notion in the literal sense, not in the programmatic sense, about what it means to be homeschooled. You know, the notion circa 1903, 1923, 1943, 1953 was that the duty of the parent was to get their kid to school, and that your educational duty was exercised by bringing your kid to school. And indeed, that the questions about truancy law and all that sort of stuff were part of that. What we've realized, both in social science and in educational research, they're not exactly two different things, are they? Better said, it's sort of conventional sociology and educational educational research, was that the flow of whatever it is that families have into their kids counts hugely. And then the question is, how do you get, how do you get flows, and then how do you increase the stock of what families have? And can you do this independent of income? That's a huge issue. And one of the things that I've been fascinated with really in recent weeks is this thing that's gone on in Chicago, partly funded by the MacArthur Foundation, called the Summer of Learning. They got over 100 different community organizations, ranging from the symphony to the zoo to the Old Town Folk Festival, to offer free or very low-cost summer programs. And then they got the Mozilla Foundation to figure out a way to create electronic badges for these kids. So you got the equivalent of getting a Girl Scout or Boy Scout badge for engaging in a program. All the agency that you needed was to sort of, and a lot of these involve family work, family work together. And so one of the things that I've been sort of touting in the last couple of weeks is, let's find a way to make Los Angeles smarter as a place to grow up. One of the things we know about cities, for instance, is that there is urban knowledge about particular kinds of things. It is, it is not by accident that the diamond cutting industry was concentrated in a few places in Amsterdam and in Antwerp. It is not accidental that the knowledge about how to make motion pictures was concentrated in this town. People learn that, it's part of their DNA. If you go down and you talk to in the old days, you talk to the old hands down in South LA County, North Orange County, about how does the aerospace industry work. There was local knowledge. There's local knowledge in the Silicon Valley about it's famously told in the stories about starting companies in garages about how particular industries work. We need to be able to tap that and organize it around what people know. And one of the things that I find just fascinating about the current situation in Los Angeles is there is a particular kind of knowledge that immigrants have about how to go into spaces that are new, and immigrant families transmit this to other families. I mean, there are stories that go back to the early part of the 20th century when early sociologists from the University of Chicago would go out in the neighborhoods. There's a famous little tract, I think, about circa 1905 called The Polish Peasant. Chicago is the second largest Polish city in the world, outside of Warsaw, and about how people got knowledge about how to negotiate the social and economic spaces around them. This is all part and parcel of what parents can do. Add to that, if you will, the notion about trying to work with parents so that they have a knowledge about how this strange thing called the education system works. How do you, if you haven't been to college, how do you tell your kid about college? And where do you get that kind of information? When I spent some time in Boyle Heights, we were actively talking about putting together, we put together parent academies and so forth that explained, what it means, to take an A to G curriculum and why that's different than another curriculum and what sort of questions to ask when you went to school. So there's a lot of social capital that parents have, and the question is how do you build on that and build a capacity of the system so that there are ways that people can learn from their neighborhood, There are ways that people can essentially get credit for learning for your neighbor, get recognized for that. And then how do you connect that with the formal education system and scaling whatever bits it has to offer? Is that a reasonable answer?
I think it's because you talked a lot about, I think my knowledge specific on LAUSD, but you're right, they're always in crisis management mode. So it's difficult for them to get outside and think about, okay, well, we know to do with, okay, we're trying to do with students, we're trying to do with teachers. So parents seem like an afterthought, right? So that piece, it's difficult, that's amazing stuff. I am familiar with Well Heights and all with it. Some of these communities do. But it seems difficult for the district to kind of get around that, that piece.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree, and indeed, I think in some ways, rather cynically, the district historically has used parents as a kind of political cannon fodder. You know, if you need people to show up at a meeting and support a position on something, we'll provide buses for you. But it is, and teachers and people at the grass level are afraid of this group of parents that they call the professional parents, whose role in life is to be as disagreeable as possible in all venues, and so there's tension there. There's real tension there because we haven't really figured out what how to do this in a constructive way. This, by the way, is not this sort of notion about the difference between parents and schools is not particularly class sensitive. You can go to very upper income areas and the teachers just are just like this. No, I don't know. I want to get anywhere close to these parents. I once knew the guy who was the superintendent of Palo Alto, and I was in his office. He said, I've got the sons and daughters of 23 Nobel laureates in my high school. He said, you have no idea how dumb I've become. Dom, you had a question.
So I guess I'm optimistic about many things that are going on, the possibilities of technology, the community-based organizations and their increased involvement, even the local control funding, which God knows how that got passed. But in order to build capacity, each one of those things involves decisions that come out of the governance structure. So I'm incredibly depressed that your first answer to the question, will LA Unified look like this in 20 years, is yes, basically it will. Because I need convincing that I can do all of this capacity building if I retain a governance structure, which is this behemoth district stretched across communities with nominal amounts in common, that have multiple city agencies and county agencies which bear no relationship to this district, that has school board elections not aligned with general elections, that has special interests that can, with 5% of the vote, electorate can elect candidates, and there's no stability to the system. So how can I build capacity with that structure existing? Now, it's happening, and it may force the district to break up, but it slows the process down so much. But I don't know how you get the capacity building decisions out of the governance structure. I guess that's my...
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think that's a very incisive comment. In a way, it's probably the most critical thing you could say in an intellectual way about my position, is that these two things are intertwined, and I would not disagree with that. The part that I was trying to get at was to try to at least shift some of the attention and the focus to the underlying problems of capacity in the system and try to end the wastage of and what I think is the equally, I mean, I've got a naive statement, but the equally naive statement is we can put enough money behind the school board, and if we change the school board, we will ergo change the system. I mean, I think we've conclusively proven that's wrong. You know, I mean, we can go through the school board elections and the attempts, the attempts of a civic elite to to try to build to build capacity behind candidates, and even when they've been successful, as they were in a very dominant way in the 1999-2000 school board election, it lasts for exactly one term. And one permanent thing I think in all this is the interest groups are going to be there. So. Regardless of what you do. And so my hope is that by working on the teaching and learning system, we can tweak and modify what people think of as their own best interest.
So a reaction or a thought and a question related to that is, as one who actually spent a lot of energy fighting the breakup of the district, for the simple reason I thought we shouldn't divide up assets and spend all our energy on that for the next 10 years, but we should educate children.
Right.
It seems to me that where I see change happening in the district is this movement towards charter schools inside the district.
Yep.
I mean, where else is there a school district, except maybe New Orleans, where the district itself has an office whose purpose it is to help you become a charter school? Okay, and it feels to me like its process is to weed out all that middle management that's been.
But it helps you under the current superintendent.
I'm sorry?
It helps you under the current superintendent of that office.
Yeah.
Whether under the next superintendent, it will help you.
But if half or 2/3 or that many of the schools become charter schools, a lot of the central office goes away. And we've essentially eliminated this whole middle bureaucratic structure in that system that then leaves room to, I mean, there's a lot to go, and I remember saying once in a meeting when we talked about these things that if we could just simply go from every person in the central office spending 2 hours working and 6 hours covering their rear to 4 and 4, the district would be fine. Okay? And
a 50% capacity rise right there.
Instantly. But I think that. But
I do have this image of a whole bunch of people up there at the Boudreaux building walking around in hospital gowns.
Yes, but that's not an image I want to think about. Thank you very much. But what I wonder about is, does this charter school internal thing drive kind of where things go in the future, in your mind?
Yeah. First of all, when we got to the end of this book, we came down on the same side of the coin that you did. Was, if we went to breaking up the school district in a legal way, you would spend 10 years on just a division of property. And it's not that it hasn't been done, as you well know. I mean, the City of London, undid its school district. And so there's a school district for Inner London, and then there's a school district for each of the surrounding boroughs, and they did divide up the property, and they did do all of this. But the caveat when you try to make international comparisons is, they've got a parliamentary form of government. When Whitehall actually makes a decision, people actually pay attention and they do it. Kind of, at least, and so the prospects for that here, I think, are really fraught with problems, which is where you start. I think it remains to be seen whether or not changing the way people learn and their access to the tools of learning will in fact change the rest of this process. I too think that this business, that Los Angeles has been underappreciated and in a way understudied. This is one of the reasons I'm very interested in the work that you and your respective teams are doing. on what's happened with the pilot schools, what's happened with public school choice in Los Angeles, what's happened with the charters. Because trying to at least start to see this as if it were actually planned that way, when we know it was, it was all, like 63,000 different things happening. But if you take this and through the clear rear view mirror of history, start to say, they built this very interesting system, and it has the following contours, and it kind of works like this. You do have, in fact, a prototypical model for what a modern contemporary school district would look like. And my argument has been that you may have this more in Los Angeles than you do in some of the school districts that get written about a lot. You may have it more in Los Angeles than you do in New York or Chicago, where you had this sort of legal centralization. That is, the mayors in New York and Chicago is a strong mayor in the legal sense, not necessarily the personality sense, that they can actually direct resources and control the school board in ways that the mayor of Los Angeles can't. But for this to have taken place in Los Angeles through all this sort of elbows out politics that over the last 25 years is to me really interesting, and that's why I think that what you have to say is maybe even more interesting than you think it is.
We hope so.
Yeah.
I think this is a really interesting way to think about what's going on in the district, but also nationally, sort of this idea of capacity and governance. And I agree with Dom that I think the two have to be done in unison, because I don't think we can shift capacity building without shifting the governance. Yeah. I think if you think about what LA has done over the last many years, they've actually been working in tandem to do that. So not everyone thinks about, say, teacher evaluation policy as capacity building, but at its heart, that's what it's supposed to be. Not everyone thinks about PSCI as capacity building, but really at its heart, that's a lot of what it was supposed to be. And broadening the portfolio, not even just charters, but pilots and SBAM schools and new schools like LIST schools. The idea is to give local control back to the schools and let them build a capacity that's best for their communities. But to do that, you need the governance shifts that have been happening in the district, and the idea that they're experimenting with, say, taking out the 7 local districts and putting them to 4 districts in the I-6 district. I think there have actually been a lot of experiments happening about how to change governance at the same time as building capacity that I don't think anyone is really studying at large. Would be a really interesting thing to think about how these things have worked together, because I don't think you can build the capacity without affecting the governance and vice versa.
Yeah. One of the things I agree with you, and so let's talk in for a minute or two about, well, what is it that universities can do about this process? Because one of the things that exists in Chicago and to a lesser degree in New York that does not exist in Los Angeles is a civic and academic infrastructure that is sort of the permanent eye on the school district. And there was a brief moment during the Learn and LAMP process when there was money to do this. And a hunk of it came here, and a hunk of it came to UCLA. And a good time was had by all. But it did not, and there were, shall we say, tense negotiations between the two institutions. But what it didn't produce was this sort of ongoing civic infrastructure that was held somewhere outside of the bounds of the school district, that every once in a while could get up and rise up and say something like, this is not making any sense. You tried this for the last 5 years, or we're just going to start to, in a very, very, sort of deliberate, anyway, but, you know, you start to get actual data, then you start to get trend lines. And you can start to sort of see things change or not think. The other thing you can do is construct scorecards. You can, you know, at some point, look, if Kate Walsh can do this for for teacher education, as far as I can tell, you know, out of whole cloth, why can't you do it for? I'm being recorded. I'm probably live with you. I'm worried. But why, you know, why is it that we can't bring ourselves to, you know, to create that little piece of civic infrastructure in Los Angeles? And it's, I mean, the whole process is really fraught with all kinds of problems that, you know, that really begin with us and territoriality and so forth. And notions about, well, what's the reward system for, you know, for a professor, and it sure isn't that. So, how all that will take place. But I do think that's one thing that that both the local foundations and higher education institutions can do in the Los Angeles areas to get, start to create the notion that there needs to be sort of a continuing study, and in the days of yore, policy analysis for California education used to produce a little book every year called The Conditions of Education in California, and it got reasonable traction. So, you know, one simple little idea would be start to do that for LA. Have commission half a dozen papers in areas you care about, and then have a little continuing simple data set. Not, you don't have to get kid level data to do this, so you don't have to break down the doors over at LAUSD, although you might want to think about doing that. That's a different question. And say, well, at the end of May every year, we're going to have a press conference. And we're going to make a report. After you've done this 3 years, you're famous.
Is there something about LA that makes it harder to do here? So, I mean,
yeah.
You and I, we've been involved in trying to get to do a research consortium.
Yeah.
I sat in front of Eli Broad, and we all
yeah.
and Roy Romer, and we all
yeah.
agreed it was a great thing that we should
right,
do
yeah.
for the city.
Yeah.
But no one, I don't know whether it's something about the civic DNA, or
yeah.
it's not the philanthropic community that there is in Chicago and New York. There's new philanthropy, but they have an agenda. They certainly don't want anything called research or study. So I just don't know what it is. There's just something that makes it, there's reasonable goodwill at times between UCLA and USC. If you add Caltech, we have 3 great universities in the city. What is it about? Is it that we don't have, there are no corporations with their headquarters, there's no major industry except for the arts, and that's never had much of a tradition of philanthropy. I don't know what it is about the city that makes it so difficult.
That's a very interesting question, and it's one of the things that we observed at the when we wrote the book that was in the empirical sense centered in the Lamp and Learn era of the 1990s. It's really easy to observe that what was called the Learn Working Group, which was really the sort of working directors of this thing, that almost all the corporations that they came from no longer exist. Times Mirror, Arco, that these, or that they have, or the Bank of America, which is, which is fled, is now the Bank of Charlotte, and so there is a sort of the there's no there problem. But even when there was a there, your statement, you know, comes to the fore. I grew up in Chicago, and I've been schooled and informed a bit by Dorothy Shipp's work on the Chicago elites. And one of the things that is really quite interesting is that the business and corporate elite in Chicago does hang together more than ours does, and that participating in this is one of the ways you earn your civic stripes. That is, your social position in Chicago is determined in part by how hard you work in some of these various civic ventures. I'm not sure that's the case in Los Angeles outside of the arts. In the back.
But like Chicago, isn't it true that a lot of the money and power have their kids in private schools, and so there isn't the investment? I mean, there's part of that. That's true in Chicago too. That there's so few people with wealth and privilege. You have their kids in public schools. You know, it's seen as a community project that's outside your own, you know, interest.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's. I want to go back to the sort of the second slide in the deck, or the third slide in the deck, about the world we created in 1903. You know, the notion of the common school was not it was going to be a school for common people. It was the school that was held in common, and that everybody sent their kids there. For the elites, that's always been problematic. You take a town like Pasadena, which for half a century has had twice as many children as it does enrollment in the public schools. What's happened both in Chicago and in Los Angeles and in New York City is that the professional middle class, say that the upper 20% of the income distribution, has almost entirely abandoned the public schools. Some years ago I did there was a little project that one of the Jewish organizations on the West Side did. They had a group of young folks who were very eager to try to do something about education policy, and they asked me to come and listen to their presentations, which I did. And at one point in the evening, one of the people who was making the presentation said, "I don't even know anyone who sends their kid to public school." And Mark Slavkin, just put his hand up and said, "I do." So that is a problem. But the disconnect in all that, I think, for Los Angeles, the difference between Los Angeles and Chicago that I'm perceiving is this notion about civic engagement as opposed to I send my kid to public school seems to be higher in Chicago than it is here. But I would love to follow this aspect of the conversation about is there a civic infrastructure, and particularly is there a research and commentary structure that could be built better in Los Angeles. And we have time for one more question. I've been told I'm off the stage because someone else is going to, this is a rent by the hour room.
And we pay him.
Well, as a parent that has two children currently in the LA Unified School District, I'd like to understand the concept of how they're distributing this large, massive amount of technology to the kids. They distribute it, and as soon as they give it, they snatch it back in. Because of all of the firewall breaking into those types of things.
Yeah. Well, I think that I don't know if you've read all the newspaper articles in the last month about the iPad, you're better informed about that than I have. I've been out of the country for most of the last month, and I sort of came back, and this thing hit me in the face, and I'm going to spend some time trying to figure that out. But the point that I'm more interested in, I mean, I understand there is both a public relations disaster and an operational debacle that has taken place with the iPads. I think the more interesting question is, how did this deal get cut in the first place? Who was it that decided that we were only going to buy Apple machines? And who was it that decided that the only person who was going to put stuff on these machines was Pearson? Now, those seem to me to be the sort of really interesting, underpinning political issues that involve the flows. I'm sort of a show me the money Jerry Maguire guy, and those seem to me to be the interesting underlying issues. One assumes, although probably naively, that these other issues will get worked out. I don't know who thought that these kids wouldn't be able to hack these systems, hack these computers, but anybody who spent any time with a 13-year-old knows that they know how to do this. And why would you try to protect against it? I think we've got somebody who's actually been going to go look at Riverside Navy. No, good. And try to where they've done a lot of this. Oops, no, I'm sorry, not ready for prime time. Okay, thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure.